G'day everybody, Justin Hogg here from RightSource and the Great Outdoors, talking not-for-profits. Today I wanted to have a bit of a discussion about how many not-for-profits there are. And I've been working in the NFP space for some time now and working across a number of organisations all over Australia, and there tends to be, when you talk about not-for-profits, an underlying tone or discussion that we have too many not-for-profits in Australia and that we should be aggregating, consolidating, that we should be getting the number of not-for-profits down. Now, I disagree fundamentally, and I think that's what this video is about. I want to talk about why I actually think there should be more not-for-profits in Australia, not less. Not that we've got the right number, but that we actually need more. Why that's the case, and especially if you think that I'm going down the wrong path, please stay to the end of the video because I've got some interesting figures to throw out there to start the conversation. But realistically, what I feel is that as an economy, as a nation, we would be better off if we actually look to have more not-for-profits. So let's talk about why. So why are not-for-profits important? Now, if you look at the reasons why a lot of not-for-profits begin, or what not-for-profit sector does in general, is generally the not-for-profit sector deals with issues that either the government can't because they're particular or they're small, or the government just doesn't have the resources, doesn't know how to deal with the issue, or corporate or the profit-focused organisations don't have an interest in that work because they can't see how they can make money out of it. So you have this gap between government and profit-focused organisations of stuff that can't be dealt with, that people see as too hard or they can't deal with. That's what not-for-profits deal with. Generally speaking, they deal with the minority, the 10% that are left behind, those that don't fit the mould, those that no one knows how to help them, or there isn't a solution yet. So because of that, the not-for-profit space is very innovative, just intrinsically. But that's the gap it fills. Now, why do we need the number of not-for-profits we have, or potentially more? As a nation, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, a lot of not-for-profits work in community. So they work with their local community to provide the needs of that community specifically. Now, with the range and diverse communities that we have and the geographical spread of Australia, that requires in itself a large number of organisations to be working with those communities in those particular needs, whether it's First Nations, whether it's communities that build up from recently immigrated people, or whether it's just people who are struggling. The diversity of our communities is immense in the nation. The other area, or the other thing that supports a larger number of not-for-profits, is that in each industry sector, not-for-profits can operate. So yes, not-for-profits tend to be focused more so on the human services side of things, but not-for-profits can operate in every single industry there is. And from my point of view, when you start seeing not-for-profits operate in sectors like food or energy, which have a real impact on the cost of living, those organisations can make a difference to how that industry operates. So I think there is absolute benefit and untapped potential in having not-for-profits work across all industry bases. So that also supports there being more. Lastly, in terms of the number of not-for-profits, is really both the innovation piece and the diversity piece. So not-for-profits are innovative implicitly. They're trying to solve problems that no one else has solved before. For innovation, you need new ideas to be able to come to the table. So that needs two things. One, it needs a diversity of thought. So you need a lot of different ways of trying to tackle a problem because you don't know which one's going to work because it hasn't been solved yet. So just to say, oh, one organisation can tackle that problem and they'll figure it out, potentially is a bit naive, and it's not how things work, even in the commercial space. What you really want is a lot of different views and different ideas coming together to try and solve a problem. So you want a large amount of diversity, and you want the barriers of entry to start helping to be low. So you want it to be easy to start up and try and see if you can solve the problem, because if they can solve the problem, that's what we're all about. So they're the reasons why I think there should be more not-for-profits. Geographical spread, the industry spread, helping communities, and because I think diversity is something that we should be investing in and not reducing in the not-for-profit space. One of the core arguments then about why we need to aggregate is that essentially we want economies of scale so all these not-for-profits can be more efficient. So if they all came together and it's like rather than having 50 not-for-profits, you have one larger not-for-profit, well then they have economies of scale and they can do things more efficiently. That isn't thinking that suits the not-for-profit space entirely. Yes, consolidation can happen in NFPs and there is definitely a place for that. But in terms of gaining economies of scale, there are other methodologies that can be used in the not-for-profit space to collaborate rather than just consolidate to gain economies of scale without losing your identity, without losing that diversity that we need to tackle the problems in the communities that need our help. So I think there's another option that we can look at there. So if it's just about economies of scale, we can do that another way. Now, that's great. They're my opinions on why we need more not-for-profits, or at least it's the same as what we've got, but I believe more. But we really haven't delved into anything factual or hard sort of numbers. So that's what I wanted to just go through now, was a few numbers. Now, one of the things, if you look at the Australian economy, we have about 2.7 million active companies trading at the moment. Now, of that 2.7 million companies, about 60,000 of those are charities and about 120,000 are actively trading not-for-profits, which equates to around about 8.5% of the actively trading companies in Australia are not-for-profits. When you look at employment for the nation, about 10% of people are employed in not-for-profits. So we have 10% of employment in not-for-profits that accounts for 8.8 and a bit percent of the industry. So even from that point of view, not-for-profits are employing 1 in 10 people. 1 in 10 people in the nation are employed by not-for-profits. And that means they're paying them a wage, they're able to sustain that. So that shows that they're an important part of the economy. To reduce that reduces employment that's out there. So that's one thing. Now, that's to give you a sense of, I suppose, the size of the not-for-profits, but that doesn't really tell you anything or whether we need more or less. So I've got some numbers here I just wanted to go through. So what to look at first is in Australia, and let's talk about charities specifically. We have 60,000 charities. Now, our population at the moment is about 26.5 million. It equates to a charity for every 444 people. So every 444 people, there's one charity. Our GDP, and this is about ability to bear the number of charities, our GDP is 1.7 trillion, which then equates to about $29 million of GDP for every charity that we have. So that's some markers. So let's compare that with a couple of other countries and see where we sit. I thought I'd pick the company that sort of typifies capitalism, the USA. So look, USA. The US has 1.8 million charities. Now, that's fine. They're much bigger than us. How much bigger? Well, if we look at population, the population is 334 million. But if you look at the number of people per charity, they have 186 people per charity. So half as much. So from that point of view, that's sort of saying that we should have twice as many charities as what we've got. Not just a little bit more, that's double. If you look at it from a GDP point of view, GDP of the US is 27 trillion. Again, if we look at it, the GDP per charity, that's 15 million. $15 million of GDP for every charity in the US. In Australia, that was 29 million. So again, that's about double. So we should be looking just on those two figures. It would look like that Australia should have twice as many charities as what they currently have to be comparable to something like the US. Now, obviously, US is very big. Okay, well, let's look at another country that perhaps that's smaller than Australia, but has a similar culture and similar structure. New Zealand. So New Zealand has 28,000 charities. Now its population is 5.2 million, so a quarter of Australia. Funnily enough, that equates to one charity for every 186 people, which is exactly the same ratio as the US. So again, this is pointing to Australia being lower on the number of charities than other comparable nations. Again, the GDP of New Zealand's 253 billion. What does that equate to per charity? So it's $9 million of GDP per charity. Again, that's even less than the US. So again, that's pointing to the fact that either on GDP or population, Australia has less charities per capita or less charities per dollar of GDP than other nations that are comparable to us. Now, is this a problem because Australia aren't good givers? Well, when you look at the World Giving Index, Australia is number 8. That's pretty good going. So we're a pretty good giving nation. US is number 6, so a little bit better. New Zealand 17. That's all still in the top half of the World Giving Index. So Australia is still a good giving nation and we still get in and we help, and that's the mateship aspect. So we still have that as part of our DNA. So from those figures, we can see that there probably needs to be more charities in Australia. Now, how do we change that? Well, I think it's really about changing the narrative and also changing how we look at the not-for-profit industry or space. I think if we start looking at, well, how do we encourage that space to flourish? How do we encourage the not-for-profit sector to be successful? How do we build that sector? How do we encourage people to participate in it and see the value of a not-for-profit? That will implicitly grow the sector. It will grow the capability, it will grow the impact it makes both to the economy, to the nation, but also to the communities and to the people who need the help that not-for-profits provide. So I just wanted to start the conversation. I wanted to bring something else, another thought, that maybe what we shouldn't be looking at is less charities, but more, and that if we do that, actually all of us will benefit, and it's something we should consider. So happy to join the conversation. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video today. If you want to look at more videos on governance in the not-for-profit space, check out my YouTube site. Otherwise, thanks for your time today. It's Justin Huck from RightSource.